Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a Freightliner Sprinter. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on the dash while the engine is running. And the customer also stated that the vehicle is losing power tremendously. He also said that the ABS light remains on the dash and the traction control light is on the dash. So the dash looks like a Christmas tree. There are a lot of lights on the dash. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go in the vehicle so we can confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the complaint, then we're gonna talk about what directions we're gonna go so we can fix whatever that's causing all those lights to be on the dash. I also want to mention that the owner of this vehicle is one of our subscribers here on our YouTube channel. His name is Differential. So Differential, thank you very much for bringing business to us. He drove all the way from Washington, D.C. to come to us. He drove about an hour to get to our shop. So thank you, my friend, for bringing your vehicle to us. With that being said, let's go in the vehicle so we can confirm the customer's complaint. I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. So we're gonna click on Dodge 2008. Let's auto ID the vehicle. Let's see if the scan tool is gonna read it as a Dodge Sprinter. It should, because it's basically the same thing. So right there, the scan tool has identified the vehicle. It says 219,000 miles, 680. Okay, so that's it. Everything looks good. This van has a lot of miles, 219,000. Wow. Okay, let's do a code scan. This is gonna scan all the control units on the vehicle. Interesting. We have two codes in the engine computer. First code is 2626, diesel particulate filter, and then the second code is 2832, lost communication with electronic ignition switch, central gateway module. And then the other one, we have 0 codes in the transmission control unit. We have one code in the electronic stability program. The code is 43C0, ABS/electronic stability program, pump control circuit low. Interesting. And then we have one code on the generic side of the tool, P242F, particulate filter restriction, hash accumulation bank 1. So it looks like we have a lot of soot in the DPF. So since we have two codes in the engine computer, I'm gonna attack the DPF code first, because the customer told me that the other shop, the shop that replaced the turbo, told him that the DPF needs to be replaced, and he wanted a second opinion to see if the other shop was right about that. So we're gonna look at some DPF data PIDs and see what happens. And then about the lost communication trouble code, we might have to erase it and go on a test drive to see if that code is gonna come back. If it does come back, then we can check our communication wires between, because it says lost communication with electronic ignition switch, central gateway module. So we might have to check our communication wires between the ignition switch and the gateway module. Now it's interesting because if we had a communication issue between the switch and the gateway module, the vehicle was gonna have difficulty starting. The vehicle was almost not gonna start, as far as I can tell, because the ignition switch tells the gateway module the position of the switch. So when you turn the switch to the start position, the switch tells the gateway module, and then the gateway module tells the engine computer to energize the starter relay so that the starter can get energized and turn the engine. So this engine starts with no issues. I hope you can hear the engine run. This engine is running. So I don't know why we have a lost communication with electronic ignition switch trouble code. Okay, we will look more into that, but let's focus on the DPF code first. So let's go into the engine computer. Let's see what we got. So we have the same codes in the engine computer. Let's look at, actually, here's what I'm gonna do. Let's go to data. Let's go to diesel particulate filter. Let's see how much soot we have in the DPF. So right here, soot mass in particulate filter is 17.14 grams. That's a lot. And then our current particulate filter load is 3.42. Our hash mass load is 0 gram. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. I am going to graph this exhaust differential PSI data PID. So I'm gonna graph this data PID over here. Okay, now this DPF code can be caused by a couple of things. The DPF itself could be clogged, causing a restriction in the exhaust system, or we could have a pressure differential sensor that's defective, because if we have a pressure differential sensor that's sending a skewed signal to the engine computer, the engine computer may think like the DPF is clogged while it's not, okay? While the issue is just the pressure differential sensor. Actually, I don't know if Matt is gonna remember, this is pretty much kind of what we were doing on the Sprinter that we worked on last week, the white Sprinter, that needed a turbo and then a PCM. We checked the pressure differential sensor with a pressure pump, but when we were checking it, we were pressurizing the first tube that's on the pressure pump, that connects to the tube that's on the inlet of the DPF. When we pressured it, our data PID was not changing on the scan tool. So now what I want to do is I need to figure out if the issue is the DPF or the pressure differential sensor. So I'm going to start the engine. As you can hear, the engine is running. As the engine is running, our exhaust differential PSI data PID is changing. So this is increasing right now. If the DPF is clogged, this pressure will actually increase. It's gonna get higher. So I'm gonna rev up the engine. I can hear the turbo whistling under the hood, so that's good. The turbo is most likely good, and we were told that the turbo was changed. Okay, so when I rev up the engine, when I hold the RPMs to about 4,000 RPMs, our exhaust differential PSI data PID goes up to 2.5 PSI. It's actually going higher right now. It's up at 2.79 PSI right now. Okay, so interesting. Now, based on this data, what can we tell from this data? Is it the DPF that's clogged, or is it the sensor? We have a couple more tests that we need to do. So now, what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to turn off the engine. I mean, we can go a couple ways. Since we have a lot of soot in the DPF, we can do a regen. We can try to regen the DPF to see if our soot mass in particulate filter is gonna go down. Or we can go straight to the pressure differential sensor and test it to see what happens. Actually, yeah, our soot mass is too high. 17.14 grams is a lot. So let's back out. Let's try to do a regen. Let's go to special functions, forced DPF regeneration. Let's see if our soot level inside the DPF is going to come down after we do the regen. Okay, so we're going to continue. Let's proceed with our regen. So I'm doing the regen right now. the engine RPMs has increased. Okay, it says regeneration has been activated. So I'm not stepping on the accelerator pedal. Matt, if you can show everyone the accelerator pedal. So here's my foot, I'm not stepping on it. Now let's show everyone the dash. So look at our RPM gauge. Our RPM gauge is close to 2000 RPMs while I'm not stepping on the accelerator pedal. Okay, so we have initiated the regen. This has something to do with the DPF code. So let's watch it. We're gonna wait until the regeneration process is finished. Then we're gonna look at the data again to see if our soot content in the DPF is gonna go down. And then we'll go from there. The regeneration process is almost done. The engine RPMs has come down. So the scan tool is almost finished here. It's almost done doing the regen. We're gonna wait for this green bar, I guess, to reach across the other side of the screen, and then we're gonna look at our soot content and see if it went down. I don't think so, but let's just see. Let's see if it's gonna help. And then as I'm waiting for this to be done completely, I'm also thinking about the ABS code that we had, because you know we have the brake light on and the ABS light on the dash. We might have to go into the ABS control unit to see if we are talking to it. I've seen issues where the pump would not get turned on because of a relay. I mean, the ABS pump would not get turned on because of a ABS relay problem, or a ABS pump that's seized. We shall see. This van has a couple issues. So the scan tool is done with the regen. So it says when engine RPM returns to normal, regeneration is complete. So that's good. The engine is still running. So let's back out. Let's go to data. Let's look at our DPF data. Let's see if our soot level in the DPF has come down. Actually, it went up right here. Soot mass in particulate filter is 18.66 grams right now. Okay, so this over here is a problem. I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. So, like I said earlier, the DPF could be clogged, or the pressure differential sensor could be the problem. So we gotta go to the pressure differential sensor and do some tests. So I'm gonna graph my exhaust differential PSI data PID. We're gonna graph this. I'm gonna grab my pressure pump so we can test it. Now, before we go and test the pressure differential sensor, I would like to go into the ABS control unit. Remember, we have two codes in the engine computer. We also had a code in the ABS control unit. So this code over here, ABS/electronic stability program, pump control circuit low. So let's click into the ABS control unit. This is what's causing the ABS light to remain on the dash and the brake light. So here's our code. So we can read codes out of the ABS control unit. So the ABS control unit is communicating pump control circuit low. Now we need to figure out the pump control circuit. Before we go check the pressure differential sensor, I just want to look up the ABS pump control circuit really fast to see how the pump is controlled. So we're gonna go to service info. I want to look at the ABS wiring diagram. This is a 3500. This is a dually 3500 Sprinter. So let's go to wiring diagrams. Let's go to anti-lock brakes. So we're gonna find the ABS pump right here, fuse B pump, fuse B ground. It's not showing us anti-lock brake control module. I thought we were gonna see the 2 wires that go to the pump of the ABS control unit. Okay, so based on what I'm looking at here on the scan tool, I know the pump of the ABS assembly is controlled by the ABS control unit, but here it's not telling me the wires that go to the pump. So I wonder if the pump has a connection between the control unit and the pump internally within the assembly. So if the pump is not working, the issue could be internally. So we might have to do a deeper dive into that so we can figure out why the ABS light is remaining on. So now we are attacking a couple of issues here, so I hope this is not going to be confusing. Now we're going to leave the ABS issue alone for now, the ABS light and everything else. Let's go back to the engine computer. Now let's go after the DPF code. Okay, we should focus on the DPF code first. So we're gonna go under the truck because I know the pressure differential sensor on these old Sprinters is above the DPF. So let's go under the vehicle and test the pressure differential sensor. We're gonna use this pump to pressurize the first tube that goes to the pressure differential sensor. So the tube that's on the inlet of the DPF. So we're gonna use this, we're gonna put it on the pressure side. So if you do this, if you turn this knob downward, you put it on the vacuum setting, and if you do this, you put it on the pressure setting, okay? And then we're gonna use an adapter. We're gonna use this adapter. Now remember on that one Sprinter we were working on last week, when I was doing the same test, the data pid on the scan tool was not changing. So if that pressure differential sensor is good, when I pressurize the first tube that's on the inlet of the DPF, the data pid on the scan tool should change. Because the way it works, I don't know if I did a good job of explaining how it works on the last video. I want to cover that up really quickly. So when the pressure inside the DPF increases, of course, if you have a blocked DPF, you're going to have high pressure between the DPF and the turbo, okay, which will cause the voltage out of the pressure differential sensor to increase, the signal voltage to increase. When that voltage changes, the computer sees that high voltage and it interprets that as a restriction or high pressure in front of the DPF. So the computer looks at the voltage change on the signal wire of the pressure differential sensor, and that's how the computer knows that the DPF is clogged. I'm going to graph the exhaust pressure data pid. Where is it? Exhaust differential PSI. Okay, we're gonna graph this. So now let's go under the vehicle and check the pressure differential sensor. We are here under the vehicle. This is our pressure differential sensor. The first tube that you see over here, this is the tube in front of the DPF, and then the small tube next to it is the tube after the DPF. So it looks like someone has already been here because these clamps don't look like OEM clamps. I'm gonna undo this clamp. We're gonna disconnect the first tube, and then we're gonna pressurize that tube. I still have my scan tool connected to the vehicle. Okay, so I hope my hand is not going to be in the way as much as possible. Okay, so I'm going to pull this out. Oops. Sorry, my hand might be in the way. All right, so I got this tube disconnected. Now I'm going to use this tube over here that comes from this pressure pump. I'm going to connect the tube on the pressure pump to the tube that goes to the pressure differential sensor. Actually, the pressure differential sensor bracket is moving. Huh. Interesting. So now I'm going to bring my scan tool over here. If Matt can show everyone the scan tool. Now I'm going to start sending pressure up the pressure differential sensor. So you can just film this area. So now I'm pressurizing the sensor. Oh, let's make sure we're sending pressure. Okay. I'm going to start pressurizing the sensor. As I'm pressurizing the sensor, I'm going to watch my exhaust differential PSI data feed on the scan tool. Actually, I hear a hissing sound. Something is leaking. It looks like this hose over here is leaking. It's supposed to hold pressure. Okay. Now the good thing is our exhaust differential PSI data feed on the scan tool is changing, which is good. Okay, we have a leak over here. Okay, so I'm gonna disconnect this. I mean, these tubes over here might be leaking. We might have to remove this pressure differential sensor assembly to check out these tubes, because if these tubes are leaking, we may have false readings for the DPF. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, yeah, something is not right here. Something is not right. Let's do this one more time. Let me make sure that my tube is connected all the way. Oh, okay. So right here. So we're holding pressure. I guess my tube wasn't connected all the way. As you can see, this is holding pressure, and our scan tool is showing us 14.3 psi. So I'm gonna release the pressure. You see, as I release the pressure, our pressure goes down. So this is what I want to see, okay? So when we go up to about 15 psi, our data feed on the scan tool changes. I'm going to release a little bit. Check this out. Pressure drops. Okay, so this tells me that our pressure differential sensor is working. It's seeing the pressure that we're sending down the tube that's on the inlet of the DPF. Okay, so our issue is not the pressure differential sensor. So I'm going to disconnect this pump from the pressure differential sensor. So now what I'm gonna do is we're gonna use a pressure gauge. We're gonna connect it to the tube that's on the inlet of the DPF, and then we're gonna start the engine and rev up the engine to see if, man, this DPF feels heavy. Okay, so I'm gonna grab a pressure gauge, we're gonna connect it to this tube, and then we're gonna start the engine and rev it up to see if our back pressure, if our exhaust back pressure is going to increase. If the exhaust back pressure increases, that will mean this DPF is is clogged, okay? If we have a back pressure that's higher than normal, the DPF is the problem. So I'm gonna get my pressure gauge connected to this tube, and then I'll bring you guys back up. We're gonna use this gauge to check the DPF. So let's see if the DPF is clogged. So I'm going to connect this gauge to the inlet tube of the DPF. So I'm gonna use this hose first. I'm gonna connect it to this tube over here that we disconnected. Let me see if I can do this. Oh, come on. Okay. I'm gonna connect this hose over here. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so we got that hose connected to the DPF tube, and then I'm gonna connect the hose on the gauge to this hose over here. Okay, so now we got our gauge connected to the inlet tube of the DPF. So now I'm gonna have Matt go in the vehicle and start the engine. He's gonna rev it up. Now, if we don't have a restriction, this gauge should barely move. So the spec on this one is anything below 1 PSI is acceptable, but if the gauge goes over 1 PSI, that's a problem. That will be an indication of a restriction. So now let's see what we got.
Ready?
Go. All right, so as you can hear, the engine is running. So go ahead and rev it. All right. As you guys can see, our gauge went over 1 PSI. Rev it harder. Okay, go all the way down. That's all the way down. Okay, go again. All right. Rev it again. All right. Rev it. All right. Okay, that's good. You can turn it off. Perfect. Okay. I mean, the gauge definitely went over 1 PSI. Okay, we were reading about 2 PSI when Matt was revving the engine. So this DPF is clogged. Now, knowing that this engine has a lot of miles, this vehicle has over 200,000 miles, yeah, the DPF is the problem. So I'm gonna get my gauge disconnected. Okay, so we're done. The pressure differential sensor is good. The issue is the DPF. We're done doing the test about the DPF code. We know the issue is the DPF. The DPF is clogged. The pressure differential sensor is good. So to fix the DPF code, we're gonna have to replace the DPF. Now, I kind of knew that already, knowing that this vehicle has a lot of miles. It has over 200,000 miles. And that DPF looks like it hasn't been replaced in the past. So that DPF needs to be replaced. So we're done with that. We got one problem figured out. So now we're going to check the ABS code that we have in the ABS control unit. Remember, we have the ABS light on the dash and the ESP light on. So this is the ABS pump, and back here is the ABS control unit. So since we have a code about the ABS pump control circuit low, so this control unit turns on the pump. As you can see, the pump is connected to this assembly over here. So there's probably a connection issue within this assembly. What I want to do now is I would like to remove the cover of the ABS control unit so we can get access to the wires of the ABS control unit. We're going to check our powers and grounds to see if the ABS control unit is missing any power or any ground. I don't think so, because our scan tool is communicating with the ABS control unit, but we're just going to double check. If we have good power and good ground, at this control unit, then the issue is going to be this assembly, because as you can see, we don't have wires that go between the pump and the control unit. So the control unit is connected to the pump internally. Okay, so let's check our powers and grounds and see what we got.